What is up, everyone? Steven here from techmaker.tv. In this episode, we are going to build out a blogging application. In this episode specifically, we're going to focus on the author area or the admin area, so what you're going to be using if you're the one writing content. I feel like that gets neglected a lot in tutorials, so I wanted to start there. And in the next episode, we're going to focus on the public side, so what people will see if they're reading your blog and so on and so forth. So what we're going to build in this episode, and this is going to be a pretty long episode, is we're going to build out this page here so you can add new posts. Once you come in here to a post, you can obviously edit the title and description and add a banner image and so on. You can unpublish and publish in here. And as you can see showing up on the right side of the screen, this is reactive, so this is all happening right here in the page. We can add new paragraphs and images by clicking on these buttons. We can edit the content by clicking, and then if we want to get out of there, we can click cancel. You can sort, so you can drag and drop and rearrange everything how you want, and all of this will save just like that. So it's pretty cool. So there may be some quirks and some issues, and I'm going to be posting some more episodes like I said. So if you come into this and there's a problem, definitely leave a comment in the comment section and I'll try to correct and update and do whatever needs to be done to kind of get this thing tied together pretty well. With all of that said, if you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Like I said, this is going to be a very long video, and I want to know if people actually like this kind of long form content as opposed to more short, like 5 or 10, 20-minute videos. So if you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up, but let's go ahead and dive in and get started with the code. To kick things off, I just want to start by looking at my Rails version or my Ruby version first, maybe. And so I'm doing 2.6.3, and then let's check the Rails version. So this is 6.0.3.1. So if you're watching this sometime in the future and you have a very different version, just be aware there may be some minor differences. With all of that said, let's go ahead and create a new app. So I'm just going to say Rails new, and I'm going to call this simple blog. And I'm kind of going off of like a simple theme lately. So we're doing another one, simple project manager. Okay, so let's go ahead and change down into the app that we just made, we'll just check and we have everything here. So let's go ahead and open up this code base. So let me go ahead and full screen this. First thing I want to do is open up my gem file, and I've covered a good chunk of what we're going to do in this video in some other smaller videos, so I'm going to try to move a little bit more quickly than normal through the things we've already covered and give more explanation to newer things I haven't talked about before. So I'll link down to a bunch of videos down in the description, so if you have questions about anything, check there, and then if there's nothing that answers your question, leave a comment and I'll get everything that I can. But I'm going to go ahead and comment out this JBuilder because I don't actually want to generate JSON in my scaffolding. I'm not building an API or anything like that. And I'm going to go ahead and add a gem here, which we did cover for authentication, devise. And let's go ahead and bundle, and we'll see where we get to. So let's go ahead and get the devise gem installed. So we're going to fly through setting up essentially the authors section of our application, so where you can actually go in, create content and manage your content. So we're going to start with all of that and get that fully built out, and then we're going to move on to the front end where somebody would read it. So let's go ahead and create a model, a devise model, and I'm going to call it an author. But first we need to do Rails G devise install, and this is going to prompt us to go ahead and take care of a few things in the app. And again, I did cover this elsewhere, so I'm just going to kind of run through this really fast. So we're going to copy this and change it in our development.rb file. And I'm just going to come down here to the bottom, devise setting, and just paste that there. Then what else do we need to do? We need to set a root to home index. So I'll go ahead and do that for now. but we don't actually have a home controller yet, so I'm just going to run a quick command in a moment to set that up. But for now, let's copy this and put that in our application.html.erb. So again, like if you're a little confused about what's going on here, just read through those instructions. They'll kind of tell you what to do and why we're doing it. Alternatively, go check out the other video. So then we're going to go ahead and create our devise views. Okay, so that is basically all of the instructions. One thing I want to do before I forget is to go ahead and create that controller. So I'm going to say Rails G controller home, and it was expecting an index action, so I'm just going to generate that. We may delete that later, but I just want to get it there in place for now so that we have it. So now if we run our server, we can go over to a browser and load this up, and we should be looking at the home controller index. Perfect. All right, so let's go back over to the terminal. I'm going to go ahead and stop the server, and I want to create a model called author. So when you log in, you're going to be logging in as an author. So we're going to say Rails G devise author, and so essentially what this is going to do is set up a model for us and a bunch of other stuff so that we can actually log in as an author. So if we create that, you'll see here that we get a new model author and a migration for authors and so on and so forth, and it's added devise for authors to our routes. So let's go ahead and migrate the database, and this will kind of let us get everything set up so we can actually go log in. So I'm going to pop over into the code now, or not into the code, into the browser rather. And if we refresh this, and then probably don't even have to refresh that, if we go to authors/sign_up, we're going to get ourselves a sign up page. So I can do Steven@techmaker.tv and then enter a password here. And so I'm going to get my alert. So everything is working. So essentially now in just a couple of minutes we have authentication set up. So that's great. Cool. So we need to actually set this up so that we can start doing some stuff. So what I want to do is, so the way that I want this to work is we're going to have posts, which is basically a blog post. And instead of just having one big text body inside of one big WYSIWYG editor or something like that, what I'm going to do is create it so that you have a post which has many elements. And so you can like drag and drop and sort these things. So you can have like some text and then an image and then a video embed and all this kind of stuff, and then you can organize it. It's maybe not the perfect idea or whatever, but it's something I'm kind of interested to do, and I think that it'll be pretty interesting for you, and it's going to look really good when we're done. So let's go ahead and set this up. So I'm going to create a scaffold here. Again, I have a recent video on what the heck scaffolds are, so I'll link down to that if you want to see it. So I'm going to create a scaffold, and I'm just going to call it post, and it's going to have a handful of things. So first of all, we're going to give it a title, which the default, if you don't specify, is string, so we're going to make that a string. I'm going to give it a description, which is going to be text. I want to have a published true or false, so it's either published or not, which is a Boolean. I'm going to add a published at, if I can, I think I didn't spell published right there, because that wrapped around in a funny way, published at, which is going to be a date time, so a timestamp. And what else? I need to have it reference the author, so it's going to say author references, which is essentially going to generate an author ID and some indexes. And I think that's good enough for now. So I'll just hit enter, and this is going to run some stuff here, and I'm just going to run Rails Db Migrate. And once we get this up, we will go check it out in the browser by running our server. So once that's running, we'll jump back over here and we'll go to /posts. And now you can see here that we can create posts. And it's kind of got a few problems in here because, for example, it's saying we should actually type in the author. This published at and all this kind of stuff is very, very weird. We're going to change all this up, so don't worry about it, but you can actually play around with it if you want to and see how it all works. But let's go see what this did in the code for us. So let's open up the post controller. And you can see here, if you're familiar with scaffolds, that this doesn't have all the sort of respond to, do format stuff, and that's because I commented out JBuilder. I think if you aren't going to actually use this as some kind of JSON API, that's a good thing to basically comment out at the beginning, because otherwise you're going to end up with a bunch of junk you don't want. But anyway, so this is pretty neat and good to go. So now that that's set up, I want to modify a few things a little bit so that we can essentially add some security here. So what I want to do is I'm going to close all of this and then open up my routes and start there. So we have this resources post that was added, and what I want to do is scope this so that you'll see what it does in a minute. So we'll say scope module authors do, and then we'll push that up in there. And now if we go to our post path and refresh, it's going to give us an error and say uninitialized constant authors. So what this is trying to do is say use, instead of saying post controller, it's wanting to look at authors post controller. And so what I want to do is sort of segment where the code lives a little bit inside of my controllers here. So I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm just going to call this authors, and I'm going to drag the posts over in there, and then I'm going to open that up and go up to the top and say module authors, and then I'm going to tab this in and bump it up in there. And now let's go back and refresh. And now what's going to tell me is that we're missing a folder for authors for the views. So if we go back down into our views folder, we'll create a new folder called authors here, and then we'll drag the posts over in there. So I think it should actually all be working as it was again now. Okay, and I'll go ahead and just create something just to kind of make sure everything is working. It looks like it's all good to go. Okay, cool. So now what I want to do is go another step further, and instead of just having this application controller, which this is inheriting from, I'm going to set up an authors controller. Now I need to do this in the top level, authors controller, and in here what I'm going to do is create a class which is authors controller, and it's going to inherit from application controller. And what I want to do in here is just before we do anything, I want to authenticate the admin. So I can do say before action authenticate author. That's the word we use, right? Authenticate author. And then in the post controller, I'm going to inherit from the authors controller like that. And now if I go back over here and refresh, it's fine. But if I copy this and I open an incognito window, it's going to tell me I need to sign up or sign in before I can continue. So that's what we want. That gets at least part of our security in place so that you actually have to be logged in before you can do anything with content. Okay, so then the very last thing I want to do with this for now is specify the layout file. And I want it to be authors. So if I refresh over here now, it's going to tell me that that layout file is missing. And so the reason I'm doing that is because I'm planning to have pretty different look and feel for if you're logged in as an author versus if you're looking at the just regular website. So I'm going to create a new file, and for now, well, I'm going to call it authors.html.erb. And then for now what I'm going to do is just copy application, and we'll put that in there. So this gives us the ability to do things like have different resources that we want to use for authors versus I guess we can use application for the regular views or whatever. So we might have different fonts. We can change the fonts and the styling and all this kind of stuff completely independently. So it's a little bit like we're running two front ends in parallel or something like that. It's not exactly that, but that's a reasonable explanation for what we're doing. The next thing that I want to do is actually set up Bootstrap, and I'm just going to grab the CSS because I'm not planning, at least right now, to do anything with the JavaScript. So I'm just going to go and search Bootstrap CDN, and I just want the CSS here. And we'll go ahead and let's grab this HTML here. Then we'll pop back over to our authors and put this up here at the top, save that, and then let's go back over to our, close this because we don't need it, and let's refresh this. So now you can see that the styles changed, so we have Bootstrap running. And I'm going to go ahead and jump up to my assets directory and delete this Scaffold CSS because we don't want that to be interfering with everything. Okay, so now let's go and close everything and open up our posts index. So what I want to do is actually, I need to create some posts, and so I'm going to go ahead and fix the form for the posts because it's all kind of messed up right now. So what I want to do is take away these published related fields, and I want to take away the author related fields, and that's probably good. In my post controller, we're actually going to set up some other code later for actually running the publishing process. So what I need to do is in here, when I see index, anywhere where I see post, I'm basically going to put current author dot post. So first of all, sorry, I'm kind of working my way through this backwards right now. So on author, we need to say has many posts, and this is going to provide us a posts method which we can call on the author to retrieve the posts that belong to them. So on set post, I'm going to say current author dot posts, and that will make, this is essentially scoping so that if we're going to look anything up, we're sure that the post does in fact belong to the author. We don't want people to be able to edit other people's posts. So that basically sets us up well for destroy, update, and well, show, edit, update, and destroy. So what we want to do here is just say current, actually index should be just current author dot posts, and then, oops, sorry, make sure I copied that. So then here for new, we'll say current author dot post dot build, and then same thing here, so current author dot post dot build for the post params, and then we save it and redirect. So now everything is scoped to this author, so we don't need to pass the author in from the front end, which wasn't a good idea anyway. It's just because of the way that the scaffold set it up. And so we don't want to have the author or the author ID be able to be pushed in or sent in. And I'm going to go ahead and take away the published and published at as well. So the only thing that you can really edit or create with are the title and description. So let's go see what our posts look like now. So we'll create a new post, title, testing this, and testing this thing out. So now we can create a post and go back. And now we see on our index page we have a post, test number 2, testing it out again. Okay, so that's good to go. So now we have a couple of things. So now let's actually work on styling this page. So if we pop back over to the index, you'll see here that we have all of this table stuff down here. So I'm going to go ahead and just, well, we have this notice in the application layout. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that because that will give us double notices for now. We'll fix that up later. The first thing I want to do is essentially say, how can I do this? So I'm going to add a container here, and in actual fact, let me think for just a second. Do we want to contain everything all the time in here? I think so. Let's go to our author's layout. And what I'm going to do is just inside the body, I'm going to say there's a div of container. And then I'm going to bump all of this up into it. And I'm going to actually give this body a class of BG light, which is going to give us a light gray background color. And then what I want to do in here is start with, I guess we want to just say H. I'm going to make it an H4 post like this. And what I want to do in here is say that this is, so what I want to have is on the left side of the screen is going to say post. On the right side of the screen there's going to be a button for new posts. So I'm going to say class equals dflex, which is display flex in Bootstrap, and then justify content between. And in order for this to make sense, the post text actually has to be in its own element. And then, so I'm going to paste this here. Then I'm going to come down here to the bottom of the screen and get this link to new post. And we'll paste this just here. And then I'm going to give this a class btn primary. And let's go see what this looks like. So now we have posts, and then we have a button for creating a new post. So we don't need this H1. And now, instead of setting up a table, I actually want to put together basically a card for each post. I'm also going to give this an MB4, maybe, MB4. So that's margin bottom of 4. I'm not sure what 4 is. I don't know if it's like REM or something, but basically Bootstrap has this M. They have several things like utility classes now where you can do M-4, which is like a margin of 4. MB4 is bottom. They have T, L, and R for top, left, and right. They have the same thing for padding and a handful of other things. So what I want to do though is say at post.each do post. And again, that at post is coming from our post controller here. So we have all of our posts by this author here. So we're going to loop through each of those posts. And for each one, I want to create a new, actually, I want to do this. I want to say link to do, link to post do, and then I want to have a card in here. So what this is going to do is make the entire card into a link. So I have card, card body, and then I'm going to have a P tag. Let's make it an H5 tag with a class of card title. And this will be post.title, and then let's see here, what else do we have? So what I actually want to do here is kind of the same thing, I think. Well, let's just get this going with kind of the basics, and then we'll do post.description. So what I'm actually going to do is have a little badge somewhere on here saying whether or not this has been published yet. I'm going to have an image that you can upload, so we'll get to that in just a minute. But I don't really want the rest of this on here at all. So let's just get this and see what this looks like. So if I refresh here, nothing. So I didn't do something. Oh, I didn't print out the link here. So that should be good. The one thing I wanted to do also is make sure this has a MB on it so that there's spacing. So let's go check out the browser now. So now if we click on anywhere on here, it's taking us into the post. So that's kind of cool. Okay, so let's make a couple of quick changes here, and then let's work on the edit page. So on this post, I'm going to give this a class of text decoration none. And then on the H5, I'm going to give it a class of text dark. And then the P tag will do a class of text secondary. So again, I make heavy use of these Bootstrap classes. I think it's quite nice what they've done. Let's give this an MB of 1 maybe, and let's see what this all looks like. So that looks pretty good. Maybe I want to give the text or the P tag an MB0. Is that a thing we can do? So that tightens this up pretty nicely. Okay, cool. So I'm liking this. I'm going to go ahead and we'll make this a lot better. Don't worry, it's pretty simple right now. But then on here, I want to go ahead and get this sorted out. In actual fact, I don't think we really need a show page. When you click on this, I think it should just go to edit. I think that's it, actually. So I'm going to make this link to edit post path, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So let's go back here and refresh. So now there's really just those two things. We can still get to the show page if we click here, but this page isn't going to end. It's going to end up being kind of useless for us. So I'm actually going to remove the view entirely, and I'm going to remove the controller action. Okay, so if we go into our post controller, and we're just going to get rid of the show. So that's it. And I don't need this here anymore either. So now if we click here, if we click this, it should get an error. So I'm going to go and modify this edit page now. So we'll go to edit, and let's see what we want to do in here. So the first thing I want to do is create a row. So I'm going to make a 2-column kind of structure here. So I'm going to make a first column, which is going to be like maybe 3 columns wide. Again, Bootstrap is, I'm using Bootstrap here, so you kind of have to familiarize yourself with their grid structure. But inside of here, I'm going to just say H4, and then we'll say editing post. Actually, I'm going to make a card, do another card body, kick this up inside there. I'll say that's the card title. And we might make that an H5. Let's leave it H4 for now. We don't need that anymore. This I'm going to put at the very top and give it a class of BTN secondary maybe. And we don't want to show. And then we do want the form inside of our card body. Okay, so if I refresh this, it's kind of what we're looking for, but not quite. So I'm going to make this have MB3, and then in my form, which I need to come in here and fix, each one of these text, or this text field and this text area, I'm going to give this a class of form control. So we'll just copy that and paste that there. And then at the button, I want to give it a class of BTN primary. So let's refresh all this and see what we got. Pretty good. I want to change this. Let's change the field. I think in Bootstrap we need to call this form group. And I don't know why my editor is not letting me do multiple things at once. So that's form group. Now you can see that's kind of, I did something wrong. Oh, I need to add a class of BTN. Okay, and I'm actually going to add another class here, BTN block, which is going to make it expand to take up the entire width of whatever it's contained in. So now this looks better for sure. So what we need to do now is actually add something where we can click a button right here that will add elements below. Okay, so this is going to start to kind of get a little more complicated pretty quickly. So hopefully you're with me up to this point. So let's jump back over to our terminal, and we will run a couple of things here. So I need to create something that is going to essentially hold the content. And so what I'm going to do is create something where it's going to be called an element, and it's going to belong to the post. So we could call it a post element, but I get tired of typing post.post elements, so I'm just going to call it an element. If this was a bigger application, you'd need to be more specific probably, but it's fine for our purposes. So I'm going to create a model. Actually, let's give it a scaffold, and we're going to call it element. And it's going to have a element type, which is going to be a string, which you could leave that off because that's a default. It's going to have content, which is going to be text. It's going to reference the post, And let me think if there's anything else this needs to have. I think this might be, it needs to have a position, which is going to be an integer. So we won't be making immediate use of the position, but it's going to be important in just a little while. I think that's it. The one thing I do want to do here is skip template engine, I believe is the correct flag. I don't want to actually have any front end for this. I just want the controller actions and the model. So let's see what this does. And then we'll run our migrations. And we'll go check this out. So if we look at our views down here, we don't have any front end for our elements. Now what we need to do though is actually drop the elements into the authors area. We'll need to do what we did before where we say module authors, and we'll move all of this up. And then here we'll change this to be authors controller. So that kind of puts our baseline security there where you can't do anything to an element unless you're logged in. So let's see here. So what else do we need to? Let's look at the routes because we'll need to bump the elements down into here. In actual fact, those are going to be nested. So now, to see what this does, let's go check out our routes over here. So we'll say Rails routes, and then we'll do grep element. And this is going to show us what the routes look like for this. So you can see here we have post elements, and then it's /post ID /elements. So the elements are nested inside of post, so you have to have a post ID to really do anything with an element. So what we want to be able to do is click a button right here and create an element. And let's go and see how we can get that to happen. So we're rendering the form here in our COL MD3. I want to create a new one, COL MD9. And right inside of here, I'm going to put a form for our elements. And I'm going to make sure to give it a type of text right now, or paragraph maybe. So we're going to have different element types. So I'm planning to have a paragraph, which is going to be rich text. I'm going to have a video embed, and I'm going to have an image. At least those three things. I think that's probably it, but at least those three things. So let's go ahead and try this. So we'll say form with model, and then we'll need to give it the post and a, let's say, text element maybe. And then we'll say do end here. And we don't have a text element, so if we go to our post controller on the index, we need to say at text, not on the index page, on the edit page. So we'll say at text element equals at post.elements.build, and then we'll say element type is paragraph. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and call that paragraph as an instance variable. So post elements. So does the post actually have any elements? Nope. So we need to say has many elements. Okay, so now let's jump back into our front end. Where was that? On the edit. So we're going to say at post at paragraph. And let's just see if we can get this. So we need to say do form. So now let's just do a quick, how can we do this? Let's see. So we'll just do form.submit. Let's just see if this even works, see if this breaks our page. I need to start my server. Okay, let's go see if our page loads. So now we have this create element button here. before we keep going, I want to go ahead and delete this scaffold CSS that was generated again. So we'll just get rid of that and refresh, and now that should kind of line back up right. Let's click this button and see what happens. So it looks like nothing happened, but let's go check our server. So it looks like we started a post, and then we get this action controller parameter missing, param is missing element. So let's see what's going on with that. So if we jump back over into the code and we pull up our our elements controller, so you can see that what we're trying to do, first of all, we haven't done anything with regard to finding our post yet. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll create a new method called set post. We'll say at post equals current author dot post dot find, and then that's going to be params post ID, and that's going to be on every single action. So we'll set post all the time here because it's completely nested, if you will recall. Then on our set element here, we'll say at post dot elements dot find. Index, I don't believe we need an index. We don't need any. We really don't need any of these. We're not going to use those at all. And we don't need these then. So we really just want create, update, and destroy. And here, what I want to do is say at post.elements.build, and then we'll say if element.save will redirect to at post, and I don't want to notice. So in actual fact, we don't really have a new page that we're going to be redirecting to. So what I would probably do here is actually say notice. Well, let's see here. So we could redirect to posts with a notice, and the notice was going to just basically say, or should say, element. We could say at post dot errors dot full messages dot join, like that, maybe something like that. So this gives me an idea because we actually need a validation on our element. But before we get to that, I want to get rid of the post ID and the position. Those are not things we're going to pass in. Okay, so let's go over to our post. Actually, that should be element.errors. So let's go to our element. And I want to do, let's do this. We'll say validates element type, and then we want to do an inclusion, and then we just want to say in, and so I want the element type to either be a paragraph or an image or a video embed. For now, we may add to this. Okay, so let's go back over to our browser. Let's refresh. Now, if I try to create without it, I could not find show for post. It's because I'm on the edit page. Okay, that makes sense. So what I want to say is right here, we'll say edit post path, like that. And then we'll go ahead and copy this and replace the variable here. So in any case, we want to redirect to the edit post path. You know what we could actually do is, well, let's leave that. Actually, no, let's go ahead and refactor this a little bit. So what we could say, because this is actually an interesting little side note here. Whenever you see this sort of thing, really what's the difference between these? And so what the if is actually controlling is just the notice. So I want to have the if just control the notice. So if element.save, so we'll say unless, well, if element.save notice equals nil, else notice equals this. like that. And then down here, we should be able to say notice, notice. So that's kind of a little bit cleaner. So now, basically, we have inside of the conditional the thing that the conditional is actually sort of handling. So I like that better. We'll see if it works in just a second. I'm not sure if we can pass nil to notice like that, but I assume it's fine. Okay, so let's give this a shot. So if we come back here and we click Create Element, so you can see here we get this message, element type is not included in the list. So what I'm going to do, and I'm actually going to need the element params again. What I'm going to do is put that in, where was I? I just got myself lost here. Edit. So I need to have a form.hidden field, and I'm going to say this hidden field is for the element type, and I'm going to say the value is paragraph. Okay, so let's refresh this and create element. So no errors on the page this time, and you can see here that we have a post, and it looks like everything was okay. All right, so let's go back to our code for just a second. So I want to move this link to back down just inside of that column, and I want to make this form submit say, for now I'm just going to make it say paragraph, and I'm going to give it a class of btn primary. We'll change this up a little bit later when we start getting to other sorts of elements. But now this is going to pop up here. Actually, this didn't move up. What happened was this back moved down, but just visually this moved up. So what I want to do is on our edit page here, so under this, I want to say, how can we do this? At post.elements.each do element. Okay, and then I want to actually set up a form for the element. We'll change this once we get to images and stuff, but for now we want to basically have a text field for our rich text content. So what I'm going to do is say text area, and that should be content. We don't want a value. And actually, I'm not even going to put a class on it for now. And then this, I'm going to say save. Let's see what this looks like. So we have two. One of these isn't actually saved to the database, and it's because when we initialize this in the post controller, we're saying current authors post.build. So what we need to do is check before we display that, because what this does is this basically makes it so that current authors.post has an extra item in there, and it's not saved to the database. So it's this like sort of pre-baked post that's not quite ready to save. So what we can do to prevent seeing that is actually say if element.persisted. So in other words, is it saved to the database? So now we should only have the one. And I'm going to go ahead and I need to add some padding here. So I'm going to say, where should I put this? I think I need to put it in here, HTML class. You know what, I'm going to put a div around this thing so I don't have to like modify the form classes at the moment. So we'll say div mb3. All right, let's see what that looks like. So now that lines up with this. I'm going to fix this in just a minute, but actually we're not going to be using this kind of text box. We're going to have a rich text editor that we're going to use. But let's just test this out and see what happens. If we save it, and if I refresh, you can see that that's saving now. Let me actually come over here to the elements controller and say if element dot, so you can't create it without the element type, and there are no other validations right now. So I'm just going to say element dot update, and I want to redirect to, that may have actually not updated because there should have been a notice. I want to redirect to element dot post, and I want to make that the edit post path, like that. So let's see what happened. Update elements. Yeah, I did update. Obviously, we looked at it, but there was an undefined method element URL, so it just kind of froze, and we didn't actually see the message, I guess. So let's try this out again. So now if we refresh, we're still seeing the same thing. Okay, so that looks, I mean, it doesn't look good, but it works. So to actually make this into rich text, what I want to do is actually go over to my terminal, and we're going to do the following. I'm going to use something called action text. That's I think it was new in Rails 5, but we'll say Rails action text install, and this is going to create a handful of things for us. I think it's going to create a table for some background jobs. It's going to create something else to store the actual rich text in. So you can see down here we got these two new migrations. And I actually realized that I don't need a content column on my element, so I'm going to remove that. So I'm going to create a migration for remove content from elements. So we're going to go over to the database really quick, the database area. I'm going to look at my migrations, and I'm going to say in here, remove column, and I'm going to say I need to name the table, so elements, and then content is the name of the attribute I want to remove. So let's run this migration, Rails Db Migrate, and this should trigger 3 different things at least. Okay, so this should be pretty simple now. So if we go back over to our element class, what I want to say in here is has rich text, and then it's going to take an argument of content, and then back in our view over here, instead of text area, we're just going to say rich text area. And I don't need this class. I was messing around earlier, so we'll take that away. So let's just quickly review this. If element persisted, rich text area. Okay, so let's refresh this and see what we get. Okay, let me restart my server. That would help. Okay, so let's try this. So now you can see here that we have, you know, basically we can do different things here. We can make it bigger, so on and so forth. I'm actually not sure what that does to make that like what size that ends up being. So if we save that, let's check in the terminal really quick. If we run over here and we say Rails C, let's look up, I think that's element, that's probably the only element, right? So element.first, and if we do that and then we say .content, let's see what that content.body. So I've got an action text object, public methods false. I'm just kind of curious about what this is going to look like. To HTML maybe? To HTML. So we have an H1 tag in here. So we can make that into an H1 tag by basically clicking on that T thing. So it's kind of strange. What that's going to do is it means that we're only going to essentially have an H1 tag available. if you look at this, because you can see that basically we either have regular text or we have big text. I don't know how I feel about that, but we'll leave it alone for now. Okay, so what I want to do is, first of all, I want to style this up a little bit once we get a few paragraphs on the page. But what I would like to see is, if we click into this, what I want to see is that there's just regular text, and if we click on it, it becomes a form. And so I want to style this up a little bit better in that direction. So in here, first of all, I just noticed that there needs to be a little bit of a margin here from the button in the form. So I'm going to give this an MT3. And I want to put this entire area inside of a card. So what we'll do is say div card body. And now let's just tab this stuff in and put it inside of that card. Okay, so then, and if you see me like cutting and pasting, I'm trying to figure out a few things with my text editor right now. I'm going to end up just uninstalling and reinstalling it probably because the syntax highlighting is screwed up right now. But anyway, that's not really my forte, is messing with that stuff. But anyway, I'll get to it eventually. So let's see what this does for us. So if we come over here and refresh, now this is kind of in a little section. If I add another one, we see that lining up like that. So what I want to do is add underneath each element. So first off, let's put each one in like its own div. So we'll say div, and then just give that an MB3. And let's paste that back here. Okay, let's see what that looks like. So now that's kind of laid out a little bit better. I'm going to give this a PT4. Kind of knock that down, maybe 5. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so that looks a little bit better. So what we need to do is inside of here, I'm going to create a div, and I'm going to say paragraph content, and then here I'm going to say paragraph form, and we'll again tab that in and move it up here. And then right here inside this paragraph content div, I'm going to just say element.content, and let's see what this looks like. Okay, so now you can see that we have our content printing out there. We can save it and update it, and this is obviously rich text that's being printed out. So action text makes that really easy and automatic, so it's just whatever you see here is what's going to appear there. So what I want to do is make it so that when I click on the content, it swaps in for the form, and when I click out, the content comes back. And so I did this in a recent episode, and I'm going to steal some code really quick, and then we'll modify it because what we're doing is not exactly the same, but it's really similar. So I'm just going to copy this and jump back over here, and then we'll go to our application.js. So, and I'll link to the video in the description, but we just want to paste that in here. So what we're doing is saying on TurboLinks loads, this is kind of standard, it's sort of like when the page is ready, we're adding an event listener click, and so we want to listen for if the click occurred inside a paragraph content. We want to add the class dNone, which is display none in Bootstrap, and we want to remove the class dNone from the next sibling. So we need to add a dNone class here. So we're saying display none on the paragraph form by default, and then there's a cancel, and then we're saying paragraph, so I should make this paragraph form. So basically we need a button with a class of cancel, and when you click that, we find the paragraph form, we add the class dNone, and then we go to the previous sibling and remove the dNone. So we need inside of here, we need an A tag with a class equals cancel, and I'll go ahead and give it a class of btn secondary, and then we'll just say cancel. And let's go see what this does for us. So if we refresh, we should just see this, and if we click, it goes back to what it was. So this is great. What I want to do, I also messed up my button here, so let me make sure I do this right. Secondary. Let's go try that again and see what happens. So that needs to be lined up better. Is there an MB? So what I'm going to do here is actually do a div mt3 and take the mt3 off the button, and then we'll get these two and bump those up together. Now let's try this. So now we have save and cancel. So this is pretty cool. So you'll remember that there's actually a second one of these things down here somewhere, I think. I think we added a blank one. So what I would like to say is if element.content.present show that, else we'll just print out a click to add content, like that. Let's go see what this looks like. So click to add content, and now I've got that. So what I don't really care for here, well, that was kind of interesting. I got them both active and I clicked cancel and they both went away. That's kind of funny. Don't know how I feel about that. Maybe it's fine. What I would also like to do is just add a little bit of custom styling for this paragraph, this whole section. So first of all, let's make this a P3. Let's go see what that looks like. So just kind of pad that in. Now this isn't our actual blog post page. This is a content management page, so it's not going to be styled like this on the public front end. So I'm a little less concerned with how all of this looks. We'll worry about the text spacing and stuff, like, because this to me is a little bit too much of a gap just for having a line break. And the layout here is a bit strange. So we'll come back to that, but for now I think it's okay. What I want to do is say, let's make this a paragraph. This whole thing is a paragraph right here. I want to add some custom styles, which we haven't done any of yet. So first of all, let's go to our authors.html. Let's make this a style sheet pack tag, which is going to pull the styles from Webpacker. Then we'll come down into our JavaScript directory inside of our app folder. We'll create a new folder called style sheets. And I'm going to create a new one in here called application.scss. In here, I'm going to import base like this. And I'm going to create a new file. This is a lot of little files, and I apologize, but it's just how it is. So we'll set up a file called base. Inside of base, I always do this just to make sure. I'm always doing little sanity checks. So I like to do something really outrageous, like background color black, important, so we can't miss it. And then in application, what I would like to do is say import style sheets / application. I think that's it. Let's give this a shot really quick. So let's refresh. Let's see what happens if it loads our background color. No, it did not. Elements, body. Okay, well, it did get my style. I just messed up because this one, there it goes. So the BG light already has an important, so Bootstrap's giving us an important, and it overrode our important. So, but it's in there. Okay, so no worries, we're all good. So in my base here, let's come back to edit. So paragraph. So this paragraph, what I would like to do, so dot paragraph, and you know, I probably want to nest this somewhere, so let's do this just really quick, and this is kind of a minor thing for the moment, but it might not be soon. So inside of this body, I'm going to give this a class of authors because this is our authors layout. So what I want to do is make sure that what I'm editing here isn't going to break something later, like on the public side in particular. So authors, paragraph, and then in here, I'm just going to say end hover, background color, and what's the Bootstrap background color? So BG light, F, let's copy this. I don't want the important, but I want the hex code. It's probably a way to do this with a variable, and I don't know if that would work because we actually just brought that in from a CDN, so I'm just going to get that color. And let's see what this does. So now we can see these things. So let's actually, when we hover, let's make the cursor a pointer, and let's make there a transition background color 0.5 seconds, ease, and let's go back to the paragraph. So we have MB3. I'm going to make this MB4 so it's a little bit more spread out even. So when we hover, it's almost not dark enough. It's very faint. Oh, Nelly, that got weird. What happened? So it's like it messed up our, maybe I need to actually import this first before action text. Let's do a refresh here and see what happens. Huh, so we messed up action text styling somehow, which is pretty strange. Okay, not sure what to do about this, so we'll fix this, but I have to pause and figure out why that broke. So it looks like when we change that to the JavaScript pack tag, we missed a couple of things. So up here, the command to generate action text automatically brought this in, which is sort of, this is a little bit hidden, but this is one thing, this required tricks, dist tricks. And then we also have all of this stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And then in my, let's go back down here, create a new file, I guess. Just create a file called actiontext.scss. Paste that in. Above base, we'll add import action text. And I'm going to go ahead and give that the relative path here. And then we need to import, so over here in, where was that? Action text up here. So we need to require this, but we do it a bit differently in Sass than you do in regular, in the CSS stuff. So what I'm going to do is add import like that. So let's save all this and let's go refresh and see what we got. Okay, so you can see that formatted properly now. Okay, so this is working now. Cool. So the next thing I want to do is add the ability to create images up here. So let's go ahead and close up a bunch of this stuff and then open up our edit page for posts. So in here, right now we're saying if element is persisted, show this stuff. What I would also like to do is say, well, not right there. So inside of here, we'll say if element.paragraph, then we'll have all of our paragraph stuff that we have. Then we'll say else if element.image, we're going to have some other stuff. Now we obviously don't have those, so what we need to do is go over to element. We don't have those methods, that is. So we'll say paragraph question mark, and then we'll say element type is paragraph, and then we'll do the same for image. Okay, so Now, what we want to do is up here, where we have this form for so on and so forth, we want to make this, we want to make another one, and it's going to be form for paragraph and image, and it's going to say image, and the hidden field is going to be for an image. Now we don't have an image yet, so we need to go over here and say post controller, I think is what it is, and in here we're going to say image and image. Now it's possible that we only need one element here, and that might actually be right, so I'll try that a little bit later with just the image, or just the, we could have something that's like this. We could have element, and then we could get rid of that, get rid of that. Let's just try it like that. Let's see if that works. So then we have post element here, because essentially these forms go to the same place. The only thing that's varying is this hidden field. And I'm going to make both of these a BTN dark, because we don't want a bunch of blue buttons across the top of the page. Let's refresh this and see what happens. Now the only thing I would like to do, let's see, how can we do this? We can say HTML class, maybe like float left on this one, and then MR2, 1, something like that maybe. Okay, so let's try to add an image and see what happens. So if I click image, it should basically add one, so we can check the server and see the logs here. So it went ahead and posted, but nothing is showing up, and that makes sense because we don't actually have anything registered to print out down here. So I could actually just say image, and now we should see the text image print out. So what we really want to do is actually have our form. So we'll copy this form, and instead of saying rich text area, I want to actually look for, well, we want to add a file field, and we want to look for an image. So we need to make a couple of small changes to the elements. So on the elements controller, we want to allow an image to come through, and then we want to open up our what is it? It's the element.rb. So up here it says has rich content. We can actually do the following. So we can say has one attached image. And the reason this works is because when we created our rich text, it actually went ahead and set up active storage as well. And active storage helps us with file management. So it makes it really, really, really easy for us to actually add file uploads and stuff. So this has to work a little bit differently on a production setting, but this should work fine for localhost. So let's refresh this and give this a try. So of course I have my cancel button, which I don't need. But let's choose a file. I need to like grab something like this. We'll open this and we'll save it. And let's go look at our server and see what the logs were. So we have an update right here, and so on and so forth, and it doesn't actually print anything out different because well, we haven't told it to. So what we want to do is say, first of all, let's indent this. So what we can say is if element.image.present, let's actually print out the image. So we'll say image tag element.image. Hopefully that works just like that. If not, we'll fix it in a second. Else, and then we have our form here. Okay, so let's give this a try in the browser. So look at that. Now that image is apparently gigantic, so let's go ahead and style that just slightly. So I'm going to do what I did above and create a div image. So I'm going to say div image, and I'm just going to copy or cut all of this and paste it in there. And then back over in our base CSS, so inside of authors, I'm going to have .image max width 100%. So this should like kind of squeeze this in here. Nope. What did I do wrong? Oh, it's because I need to actually grab the image tag. So the image tag max width is 100%. Now let's try this and let's see what happens. Okay, so now you can see that's fitting into the page. So now we have the ability to add rich text, and we have the ability to add paragraphs here. One thing we need to be able to do is delete everything. So with images, I don't really care about changing the image because frankly, you can just delete it and upload a new one. And with the text, you can already edit and so on. So we just need deletes for all of these items. So let's start with the paragraphs. So if we go up to where we have the form here, what I want to do is actually make this a deflex and do the same thing, justify content between. And then I'm going to make a div here, which is going to live on the left side of the screen. And then I'm going to make another, basically a link to delete. And that's going to go to the post element path. And then we'll give it the @post and the element. And then we'll say that it's method delete class btn danger. Let's go see what this looks like. Actually, we need to do one other thing, which is data confirm are you sure. It's always good to prompt before you do a delete on something like this. So let's click in here. Now we can see we have a delete over here on the right side of the screen. If we click in here, you can click that, are you sure? And we didn't actually update that on the elements controller to redirect to the right place. So let's go back over there. And we want to just redirect to @element.post, and I keep doing this wrong. So let's copy that. So we're redirecting to the edit page. Let's go back and refresh. So now we can go ahead and delete this. And now we just have our image. If we add a paragraph, we'll get the new paragraph down here. So that's looking pretty good. I need to add a little spacing around this image. And actually one thing I think I'm going to do, I'm sorry, I'm kind of like building this out on the fly. I have a pretty decent idea of what I want it to look like, but not 100%. So I'm actually kind of working it out as I go. So we're going to add a little bit of styling here. This image, what I want to happen is on the image, I want a text align center. And then I want the max width to actually be something like 80% so that it doesn't take up so much space. So let's check this out. So what I tried to do there is make the image a little smaller and centered, and then give it a little spacing between that and the text elements around it. Okay, so this is actually working pretty well. What I need to have is a way to delete this image. So what I think I'm going to do is put something like, I guess I'm just going to put a little delete button just below it on the right, maybe. Maybe that's the right move. But what we can actually do is just copy this exactly. And then down here, we'll just have a link to delete. I'm going to add a MT2 maybe, and then we'll say float right. That might not work together. Let's see what this looks like. That's not what I wanted. MT2, where does that go? is that doing some kind of, oh, it's because both of those are inline items, I believe. So if I put that in a div, bump that up like that, let's see what that looks like. So now that's going to center it, and I want to actually float it to the right. Let's see if that works. Huh. It's not terrible. It's kind of weird. It's not terrible. Let's see if it works. Okay, so cool. Now this is pretty much hooked up. So we're going to do another pass at this once we get like a little further along. Because I don't like the way that looks, but I can live with it for the moment. What might be nice is if there was actually an icon like hovering right here, like an X. And these are actually, we're going to turn these into icons in just a little bit, but I want to add a few other things before we get there. So let's jump back to the code, and I'm going to open up that edit page again, and I'm going to open up the form. So we added I don't think we added anything to let me check the schema really quick. So we have all of our active storage stuff, we have elements, post. So I actually want to add an image to the post, and we're going to call it the header image. And so what's nice about this active storage is we can just come in here and without doing anything to the actual post class really, we can just say has one attached, and we can call it like header image, like this. And what we can do when we have that is we can come down here under our, we can come down to our form for the post and give it a header image file field. Like this. And I'm actually going to reuse my, well, no, sorry, I'm just kind of thinking out loud. So if there is an image, so if, what's the object here? It's post.headerImage.present. We'll actually print out an image tag, header image. That should be post.headerImage. And I'm going to give it a width of 100% right here. I think that will work. Okay, so let's refresh this. Undefined method field. It's been a long day. So file field. Okay, so now it's going to say, we got this weird, like, I guess it's because I'm in a form group. It's trying to make this little border around it. I'm not going to worry with it too much. I need to get some like smaller images. Maybe I have something like on my desktop. Show cannot be found for post controller. So let's go to the post controller, and right now we did not fix these, so we need to make this edit post path. And again, I think I don't want to notice here. And I'm going to do the same thing there. So we're going to choose a file again and click on this thing. So it doesn't look like it worked. Maybe it was. Post.headerImage. Oh, okay, messed that up. So on our post controller, now we need to allow the header image parameter to come through. So we have to permit that explicitly. So that in our, where was that, in the form? So we have a file field for header image. So anytime you have some kind of form attribute you're trying to pass through, you have to explicitly allow it. So let's try this one more time. So we'll choose image, we'll grab this. Okay, and so now we see our image printing out here below. And I want to go ahead and make a little, well, let's do a div class is mt1. Okay, and I'm trying to decide if I want to say something like small current image, maybe like that. Yeah, I think that looks great. So now that I have a header image, I actually want to display it out here. And the way that I want to go about doing that is, first of all, I always like to close down the files as I'm kind of switching ideas that I'm working on. Just helps me stay focused. So I'm going to open up the author's posts index here. And what I want to do, I may change up how I'm doing this, so be forewarned. But what we could do is say something like div col md2 and then div col md10. And then in here, I could do something where I say like div class equals header image. So on this, I'm going to create a class of postcard. Then we'll have header image. And then in here, I'm going to say style equals background image URL. And then I'm going to give it the post.header image. I think that will work like that. So in our base, let's go down here to postcard. And let's see, we want to say postcard header image. Width is 100% and the height, I don't know, let's call it like 100 pixels or something. And let's refresh this and see what we get. So we're not getting anything, and I suspect we actually have to call URL on there. So let me actually throw a header image dot, let's see. So after a little bit of Googling, it looks like I need to do this, URL for post.header image. And I'm personally not super crazy about that style there, but you know, maybe it's fine. Undefined method to model delegated to attachment, but attachment is nil. Okay, so what I need to do is say if post.header image.present. Okay, so otherwise just leave it alone. Okay, so we got that going on. I'm going to move those up into there. Okay, so that should have done something different. Oh, I need a row here. So this is a Bootstrap thing, but you have to have a row if you want the columns to split up properly, I think. Okay, that's getting a little bit closer to what I'm thinking. Obviously, I want the image to be styled a bit differently, so I'm going to go over to my header image, background size, cover, background position, center. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, so this is definitely getting closer to what I'm imagining here. Let's just see, maybe we can make that a little bit. Problem is this thing's going to vary as we squeeze things in. So like if let's open up our developer tools here and turn this on to responsive. So you can see that, well, I don't actually have my my meta tag to set the initial width done properly, but you can see as we go through the sizes that kind of gets a little bit weird. But I'm going to leave it alone for the moment. So the next thing I want to do is set up something where we have a button down here to publish or unpublish a post. And then we're going to set up the logic to make that work. So if we go in here to our edit page, just under render form, outside of this, I'm going to create a new div, and I'm going to make it the card footer. And then basically what I want to do is say if at post.published, which we get this published with a question mark method automatically when we add a Boolean to the database with active record. So if the post is published, let's make it an A tag with a class of btn danger maybe, and we'll say unpublish, and then otherwise, let's make that a btn. I don't want to have like bright red all over the place. So secondary, and then let's make this one dark for publish. Let's go see what that looks like. And I'm going to make those both a btn block, so they take up the entire bottom. So that looks okay. So what I want to use to actually do the publishing and unpublishing is a tool called Stimulus Reflex, which I've been playing around with and been pretty excited about lately. It might be kind of overkill for this project, but that's okay. It'll be fun, so let's just go with it. So what we need to do is run, first of all, we need to bundle, so we'll stop our server, bundle add stimulus reflex, and this will rerun bundle install and add that gem to our gem file. So once that's done, the next thing we need to do is say Rails stimulus reflex :install. And this is going to set up a few things for us. So once that finishes, we should be able to start creating what's called reflexes. So I'm going to run this. I'm going to say Rails G stimulus reflex. And I'm going to create a reflex called publish. And actually, let's actually rename that. So we should be able to do Rails D, which is the opposite of G, so generate and destroy. So I'm going to call this publisher. So it's going to create something called the publisher reflex, which I think is kind of nice. So okay, now let's go ahead and run our server again, and let's get this going. So what we can do now, which is quite cool, is in our A tags here, we can add a couple of things. So in my publish, I can say data reflex equals, let's see, I want to put this on some different lines here to make it a little bit easier to read. So data reflex equals, and then on click, I want to specify that I want the publisher reflex to call the publish action. Okay? So basically the syntax here is we call data reflex, we tell it which event we want, then we tell it which reflex we want it to use, and then we say which method to call on that reflex. And then we can provide some extra data through data attributes. So we can say data post ID equals, and then we can say post at post.id, right? Okay, so let's do the same exact thing for unpublish. Let's fix this back to be secondary. And then here I'm going to call unpublish, and then down here let's change this text to be unpublish. Okay, so now let's have a look at that reflex class that was generated. So we have this new folder here, reflexes. So let's look at the publisher reflex. I'm going to go ahead and just remove all this documentation comments that are in here. So I'm going to create two methods, publish and unpublish. So let's think about what we want to happen. So first of all, what we get is we get access to an element. So whichever element in the sort of default setup, you can do this in a little bit fancier ways, which we may get to later. But right here, we have this data reflex defined on this element. So this element carries along with it its sort of HTML properties. So we can call things on it, which you'll see in a second, like we can pull this post ID off. So what we're gonna do here is say post equals post.find, and we'll say element.dataset, and then what we want to do is say post ID like this. So it kind of works like params in the controller. So I want this on both of these reflex methods. And then what we can do is say post.update, and then we'll say published true, published at, and then we'll say time.now. And then we'll do the opposite on unpublished. So we'll come down here, copy this. So published is false, and published at is nil. So is our server still running or no? Yeah, we just restarted it. Okay, so we should be good to try this out. So let me refresh, and let's see what happens if I click publish once it finishes reloading. So it's going to make me log in again. I think I have an issue with the this has something to do with action cable and authentication related to that, I think. But if I click publish, you see straight away it becomes unpublish. So there's no page refresh, there's no nothing, it's just right here in place. So let's add a couple of things that let us know that actually this is indeed published. So in the top of our card over here, above the form, so what we could do is, let me see where this would be nice to put. Probably be like right here would be good to put. So we could say if at post.published you could say like let's say div float right, and then, well, no, let's not do that. Let's just make it div, and then we'll say badge, I think is the thing, and then badge, let's say primary, and then we'll say published, and then just outside of that, let's call this a span instead of a div, and then right here we'll say published, and then maybe we could say something like time ago in words, and then at post.published at, and then maybe this needs to have a margin right of 1. Sorry, I'm just making all this up on the spot. So I don't love the way that looks, but that's okay. We'll change it up. I just wanted you to see what happens if I click unpublish now. So you see that that's just immediately appearing and disappearing. And so this is like really, really reactive kind of style programming, so it's quite cool. I got to find a better place to put that, but for now, I think that's a really cool little feature. Actually, you know, I'm just seeing something here. I think I'm going to add a little header section on both of these, and we'll see what it looks like. So if we come into our card over here where we're editing this post, and we do div card header, and we bump this up into the header, and maybe we make this an H6 so that it's quite a bit smaller, and Let's see what that looks like. So I need to give that card, you know, let's actually, what does it look like if I don't have a card title on this? Maybe let's do card title MB0. Okay, that's looking better. Then what I would like to do is over here on the top of my card, I want to have a card header as well. And I think I can do it like this: text align right. And then let's grab this and cut it. And I don't want the badge actually. I think I just want to have published time ago in words ago, else, and we'll say unpublished. So let's see what this looks like now. So that's not right with the class, but that looks okay. So I'll say, let's inspect this really quick. Let me just do a quick check here. If I do text align right on this, that's what I want it to look like. So let me check the Bootstrap class for that. Bootstrap class align text right, maybe. Text. Okay, so it looks like we can just do text right. Okay, so that's cool. So we just need to say text right. And I think what I want to do here is actually make this bold. So let's check out what this looks like. Cool. So now if I unpublish, unpublished, published. So this looks really nice. So the next thing I want to do, and again, like I'm kind of taking some time because I want to make this look really good. It's part of this lesson / episode for me, is making this look good. So what I want to do is actually set up Font Awesome. So Font Awesome is really cool if you haven't used it before. If you click Start for free, it'll take you through getting set up. I'm going to go ahead and just paste in my authors.html.erb. I'm just going to paste a script tag down here that's going to essentially load the Font Awesome stuff for me. So let's come over here to the icons and let's do a search for paragraph and see what suggestions it gives us. Okay, so that's actually fine. It's literally a paragraph, so we'll copy that. And what I want to do is up here, I think I actually have to do this in a strange way here. So I think I have to do button type is submit class btn dark. I'm doing this from memory, so hopefully this works out okay. So we'll paste in our paragraph icon, and I'm just going to go ahead and cut my previous one. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, button, okay, doesn't have, so maybe that should be form button tag. Okay, so let's see what happens if I click it. So now I have a new text down here. Okay, cool. So that's nice. And then I want the same sort of deal for image. And let's see what this prompts. So I kind of like this one, just image. That makes sense. So we'll do the same exact thing down here. Button tag, type, submit, class btn dark. I'm going to change that in just a second because I don't really care for how this is looking. And we'll paste that image icon in there. So let's change this to be, I guess we could do a few things here. Let's try info. If we had a lot of these, this isn't going to look great. In actual fact, maybe what we need to do here is say secondary. That's kind of a medium gray. And then maybe up here, we make the back button actually the dark, since there's one of those. Let's see what this looks like. I'm going to have two buttons. I forgot to take away my submit here. So let's go see what that looks like. Not completely crazy about that, to be honest with you, but I don't know. We'll think about it. Let's add a few things here. So let's see. How's this looking? I think it's pretty okay, except for these deletes. So I want to fix the delete. We're going to build out some real content in just a minute so that this starts to look a little bit more put together, because right now it's weird with very empty content, I guess. So let's fix this delete button here. So how can we go about that? So that's down here on our image. I think one thing we might do is get rid of this div, and let's move this up to the top. Let's make this an icon again, actually. And let's see, what icon? I think it's close. I'm gonna do this for memory. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, so that's not it. So let's do close. Window close times, it's times, I think is the one that I want. So we'll say FA times. And I actually want to bring this over on top of the image in the right. So let's play around with this a little bit in terms of the positioning and see how we can do that. So what's happening on that? So is it floating? I'm going to take away the float right. Let's take this and let's just write a little custom CSS here. So position, absolute, right 0. So the image is 80% wide. So if I make this 10%, it should be sitting pretty good. So let's make this 15%. So that's not going to get us to be exact, probably. Let's see what happens if we slide this in. So it's kind of weird. I wonder if it would make more sense to use that as like a background image and then place this inside. Oh boy, I don't know. Let's make it, let's say 14, 15, what is it, 10. Is there a way to get right on the edge of this thing? I guess not, right? CSS is not my specialty, to say the least. Maybe if we do 10% plus there's a padding of some sort on this thing. So what's that amount of padding? That looks to be about like 15 pixels. Let's see if we can find that down here. So that's 16 pixels, I think. So we'll do calc 10% plus 16 pixels. That should probably be, let's just do like, it's really ridiculous. That's not going to work as we go up, or probably even on other images. So that's not going to be perfect probably in most situations. Let's see what happens if we move it in. Well, it seems to pop into place okay. That's a really weird one. So let's see if we can get that to do what we want. So we're in the image. We're going to do, let's see. So that's the, let's call this the delete btn. So, okay, image dot delete button, paste those things in there. So then I want to actually make this btn dark, maybe. See what that looks like. I like that a little bit better. It stands out a little bit less. And I'm actually going to make that, let's see here, opacity 0.7 or something like that. Let's see how that looks. And then maybe on hover, and hover opacity should be 1. So that looks a lot better. Cool. So, all right, that's pretty nice on the design front, I think. So let's go ahead and try to build this out with some semi-realistic looking content. I'm just going to go over and grab some lorem ipsum text, sort of just for filler. And I'm just going to grab this and probably copy it a few times in a few places. So what we want to do, let's make this a headline, make it bold maybe. Let's split these kind of like we're writing an article. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's generate another lorem ipsum. And let's just make another paragraph here. So we'll type or click that paragraph there, and then make this kind of split here. Maybe this is just bold, and then we'll kind of create a few little paragraphs there. I don't want to delete, I want to save. And I think that looks pretty nice. So let's add in an image. And so let's suppose that we, actually let me go over and grab a new image. I'm tired of looking at some of these. So if we go over to Pexels and just search for like city, let's search for Europe or something. So Big Ben, I think that's Big Ben, right? Yeah. Why not this one? Why not? So we'll just drag that over onto our desktop, and then I'm going to bring that in. So we'll save that, and now what I would like to do is what happens if I want to put that image, I think it's going to save. That is a new one for me. Database is locked. Huh. Well, refreshing the page seems to have fixed the problem. So one thing that's bugging me is that the bottom of the page is up against the bottom of this card. So I'm just fixing these little style things as I see them. Right here, I'm going to give this an MB5 so that it should scroll further past so that that's not butting right up against the bottom of the screen. But what I would like to do is actually be able to grab this and drag this up here and put it in between these two paragraphs. To do that, let's jump back to the terminal and stop the server. And I'm going to add a new tool. First of all, is anything running over here? No. Okay. So I'm going to add a new tool to our JavaScript called Sortable.js. I have a separate video on this if you want to watch this a little bit more in depth. But we'll run that and then start our server back. Okay, so then if we jump back to the code and we open up application.js, I think we should be able to import sortable from sortable.js like this. And let's see. What I'm going to be looking to do is essentially have something like this. Let elements equal document.get element by ID. And then we want to have something like elements. And then what we can do is say something along the lines of sortable.create elements. And then I'm going to give it a option here for animation and save at 150. So this will make more sense in a second. We don't actually have this elements thing yet. So what I need to do is each one of these paragraph and down here image, what I need to do is wrap all of this in an unordered list. And so I need to start here. Oh boy, that's going to be hard to see what's what. Let me see if I can come down here. Maybe I can cut it and then I'll see. So let's just do a guess here and say it's that one. So I missed one. Okay. I need to probably move some of this stuff into partials so it's a little bit easier to see. So then we'll just paste that in there. And that looks like it lines up okay. So fingers crossed. Then what we want to do is essentially right inside this if element is persisted, I'm going to put an li tag. And instead of going through all of that trying to figure out what's what, I'm going to come all the way down here to the next to last end tag and then do an li like this. So let's go refresh if our channel or server is running. Let's refresh and we should see little dots on the left if this worked. Like if they're list items now. Yeah, so that's what I was anticipating. So let's go over really quick. Well, let's do this. So we want to give this an ID of elements, like that. And then in our base CSS, we can say authors, and then we'll just say elements, list style, none. And also I'm going to say padding left 0, I think is the way we do this. And now this should line back up. Okay, so that's what I was expecting. But since we added that sortable code, I think, see how we can drag and drop that now? So that's pretty nice. It doesn't save, and that's important to point out, but it does let us move things around. So that's pretty slick. So when we refresh, this doesn't save though, so now we need to hook that up. I just noticed one little thing that's sort of aggravating. If we click this cancel, it actually refreshes because we're not preventing the default. So what we want to do here is say in this click, so here we're matching on cancel. And again, there's a whole episode dedicated to this, so I'm not going to rehash the whole thing right here. But right here, once we get past this if statement, we're assuming that we're in the cancel. So I'm going to say event.prevent default. And yeah, I think that should do that. So let's refresh and let's see what happens now. So if I drag this up to the middle, and then I click on this and click cancel, it doesn't actually go anywhere now. So that's good. Okay, cool. So that's what I wanted to fix. So to get going with actually saving this data, we're going to take a look at Stimulus.js. And we're going to just take a quick look here at how they have this set up um, with their quote-unquote hello controller and their little example. So I'm going to copy this and just kind of show you how this works really briefly. So let's just stick this at the very top of our page. And then they have some hello code here. And because we have Stimulus Reflex installed and it depends on Stimulus, if we go inside of JavaScript controllers, we should already have a hello controller. So I'm just going to paste this in here. And let's go refresh our page and let's see what this is looking like. So I always do these little sanity checks just to make sure I'm not going crazy and that this works how we expect. So if I put my name and it prints out, so we know this is working. So what I want to do is create, well, let's create a controller called, how do we want to do this? I guess we could call it like sort. No, let's call it elements controller to be sort of generic. So we can create that here, new file, elements controller.js. And I'm going to just copy this code and we're going to modify it. And so we don't need to do anything to this. We don't need to do anything to this. We don't need any of these things. What we want is a method called sort. And I'm just going to, for now, console.log. And we're going to say sorting elements. Something like that. Okay? So far, so good. So let's close down some of the stuff that we don't need here. Now let's copy this, or cut it rather, and let's take it and let's put it closer to where we're actually working. So I'm just going to stick it right here. So you can look at this and see what we need. So we need a data controller. So we have this div card body that's wrapping around all of our elements. So I'm going to go ahead and just make that my data controller. So I'm going to say data controller equals, what do we call that? Elements. So the name here has to match the first part of the name before the underscore controller. And so this is how you say, hey, everything in here is dealing with this elements controller. Okay? The next thing we want to do is specify something to sort of listen to. So this on this, so an action essentially. So this in this case is a button. Sorry, I'm stuttering. We can say when a click happens on this button, trigger the hello controller greet method. And again, these are these JavaScript controllers. What I want to do, and I'll copy this because I'm being lazy, say the data action here is drop, and on drop I want to trigger elements and sort. And let's delete all of this, and let's go back and let's refresh and see what's going on. So now our little demo at the top should go away. And let me open up the console down here and let me move it to the side so we can see what's going on. So let me try to drop something. And we got nothing. So I did two things, and there's a weird thing happening with Stimulus, and maybe I just don't know what's going on well enough, frankly. But I had on, the only two things I've changed is I had on the mobile simulator, so I turned that off. And I also did a hard refresh with Command-Shift-R on Mac. I assume there's a similar thing on Windows. And now, if we drag and drop, you see here we get sorting elements printing out. So that's basically where we were trying to get to. But yeah, so that was a little annoying, but now that's working, so that's good. So to sort all of this stuff, we need to do a couple of, and sort it and save it on the database. we're going to need to essentially pass some data along to the server and tell it to make an update. And so we can do that. Well, we're going to use stimulus reflex to do that actually. But we need to provide it with some data, and this is a little bit more of an involved setup than our previous one was. So what I want to do is add for each element, I'm going to say data element ID equals element .id. And actually, I think I'm just going to say data ID. I think that'll be fine. I think that's about it, actually. So then over here in our stimulus controller, I don't actually need this. I was experimenting trying to fix my problem and ended up not using that at all. So what we need to do is, first of all, let's see. So in any event, so no matter what's happening, we're going to need to pull the let's see, elements. That's kind of funny. Elements. Let's just call it elements equals document .get element by ID. Actually, we could call this the elements element, which is kind of strange. Now let's leave it. I'm sorry, I'm going to quit bouncing around on that, and then we'll just say elements. And then we want to get the, essentially what we want to do is get the, we need to add a class over here. That's one thing I was forgetting. Class equals element item, like that. And in actual fact, I'm sorry I keep going around on my semantics here, but this is going to be important. So I'm going to say let element equal that, and then I'm going to say let element items equal, and then we'll say document get elements by class name, and I want to get the element item, like that. And in order for me to make this work, I need to call array.from on this, and we covered this in a recent episode on drag and drop, and so I'll let you take a look at it there. And then what we want to do is say let, how can I do this? Well, I guess I can just call this elements. This is getting really tricky because the naming here is hard because I'm trying to use the naming to talk about HTML elements, but now my database object is also called elements. Let me think about the naming in a second. Let's get the code working at least. So we're going to say element items dot map, and then that's going to take an element, and it's also going to take an index. And what I want to do is return an object which has an ID, which is going to be the element data set. I think I can call ID. And so that's being pulled from, if you're kind of new to the whole HTML thing, that's coming from this this data right here, data-id. On the JavaScript side translates like this, element.dataset, I think, if I don't mess up some syntax somewhere. And then I want to say the index. Actually, what I want to do is say position is index plus 1. In actual fact, no, that should be fine. That should be fine. So let's console.log elements and get a look at what's going on whenever we drop something. So let's refresh. And I have a problem. What did I do? There's got to be an error in here somewhere. unexpected token on line 54, no, line 8 maybe. Map element, didn't like something. Oh, I need an arrow. Whoops, let's try that again. Okay, so let's try to drag something and see what happens. So we get 3 objects. We get the ID 4, 6, 5, and now the position is 1, 2, 3. And so what we're going to do is basically save the position on the database now. And that's essentially going to keep us, then we're going to order what's listed on the page by position ascending. So I assume that this element has an ID of 4, this one has an ID of 6, and this one has an ID of 5. And now, because of how they're displayed on the page, they have the relevant positions. So how do we go about doing that? So what we can do, and we're going to pass this element to stimulus reflex here in a minute. And when we do, if you will recall over here in our publisher reflex, we're dealing with this element.dataset. So that element is essentially going to be sent by us here. And so the way that we used this before was sort of the default implementation of stimulus reflex. Right now we're going to be using a little bit more manually built out kind of way of doing it. And so you have to actually tell it what the element is going to be. And we're going to actually send along some data in this element. So we're going to say element.dataset.elements equals, and then I'm going to do json.stringify elements here, like that. And I don't need to console.log that now. And so that's going to get our elements ready to be sent. Now, what I also need to do is, instead of using this controller here, let's take a look at this publisher controller. So what we need to actually do is use all of this stuff. So this is going to make this a stimulus reflex controller, not just a stimulus controller. And again, I have some other episodes on stimulus reflex if you want to check that out a little bit more in depth. But let's go ahead and update that, and then I'm going to get rid of that comment there. So since this is a stimulus reflex controller, we have this method that's been added called this.stimulate. And what we're going to do here is pass in essentially a stimulus reflex with a method that we want to trigger. So what we can do is say something like elements reflex, and then the method we want is probably sort, and then we can give it the element that we've been working with here. So what we need to do is come over here to the reflexes, create a new file, and I did this automatically last time with that command, but I'm doing it manually this time. So we'll say elements reflex.rb, and essentially what we want to do is say the same thing we did over there. So we'll say class elements reflex inherits from application reflex, and then in here we're going to have a def sort, and all we're going to have to do in this sort method is essentially this. So we'll say elements equals element.dataset.elements. And remember, we made those into JSON string in order to pass it over here. So we'll say json.parse this. And then we will say elements.each do element. And again, I think this is not the most efficient way to do this at all. I mean, I know that it's not, but I'm not going to worry about it in this simple tutorial. So maybe we'll come back and kind of refactor this later. I'm trying to use my time right now to lay the foundation for some interesting stuff now, but we can come back and add more advanced stuff on top of it later. So I'm going to say element record equals element.find element dot, what will be ID, like this. And this data set actually is not a dot, it should be like this probably. And then in actual fact, that's going to be a string most likely once it's parsed from JSON. So we'll get the element record, and then we'll say element record dot update position and element position. And as far as I can tell, that's probably it. So let's refresh. Should take a second probably. And let's try to drag and drop our image up here. Hold on a second. Apparently I broke something. I got a JavaScript error screaming at me. Unexpected token in the elements controller. On what line was that saying? Line 5? Wasn't this just working? Oh, I know what it is. I think I'm missing that. That's what it was. Probably. So let's go ahead and try that again. Let's keep an eye on the console over here and see if it freaks out on me this time. Nope. Okay. So now we're dragging and dropping. And let's refresh, and it did not work. So let's check our terminal over here. One thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to open up my gem file, and in development I'm going to add gem pry rails, and you know, I've been using pry for so long, and it says I can use console, so I need to learn that, I guess, since that's probably the officially good way to do that now. But for now, I'm going to stick with what I know since I'm in the middle of making a video. So what I want to do is over in my elements reflex, let's put a binding.pry right here and see if we're even hitting this. Okay, so I don't need that open. That's good to go. It's going to force me to log in again, probably. Steven at techmaker.tv. Okay, so let's drag something and drop it, and let's see what happens here. So nothing happened there. See if I got any errors over here. Error invoking this.stimulate is not a function. You know what? That's kind of weird. Hold on a second. Oh my god, I think I've just been staring at this too long. Stimulate is not a function. Okay, so false alarm. I'm going to go ahead and comment out this pry. We may need it, we may not. So this should be stimulate, not stimulate, if that's a word. It sounds like something you do in organic chemistry class or something, which shows you how much I paid attention in organic chemistry. So let's try to drop something again. So let's do one thing really quick. It's dropping, and you can see all this stuff being printed out here by Stimulus Reflex. One thing we haven't done is actually in our edit, what we want to do is say elements.order position ascending. And let's go check what that looks like. So now have a look at that. So we've got our stuff drag and drop sorting now. So if I refresh the page, you can see that that's saving there. So how cool is that? So the last thing that I want to do in this episode, because this is getting really, really long, I want to actually try to build this index page out just a little bit more. And I want to go ahead and actually add a little more content so that we get a little more kind of realistic looking descriptions on the front page. This might actually be a little bit long. does look a little long. Let me just trim that a little bit there. And let's give this a really good title. So let's just go to like mashable.com or somewhere and grab a headline. Maybe not about COVID-19 because that's a little depressing. Let's do SpaceX. Sounds cool, right? So let's do that's a headline. And then I'm actually going to choose a different header image here. Not at all related to rockets. And so we'll go ahead and update this, and let's go back and check out our home page. So that looks pretty good. Then let's do the same thing for this test number 2. Let's just grab some other headline. Goodness gracious, that's an aggressive website. Okay. So my computer is actually heating up right now as I'm on Mashable, so I haven't been on there in ages. It's just the first random thing that popped in my head. So that's kind of crazy. So let's grab one more paragraph here and choose us a file for the header. Let's go with that one. And okay, so now that looks a little bit better. What I want to do on this page is essentially, so this is my index here. Where are we? Inside of this, what I want to do is add a span with a class of badge. And essentially what I want to do is say if post.published, that is crazy. My computer is cooling back down. That website was literally overheating my computer. Probably because I have other stuff running like the recording software or whatever, but that's crazy. So if it's published, I want to give this a badge primary and say published, something like that. Else, I want to give it a badge of secondary, say unpublished, I think. Unpublished. See what that looks like. And I'm going to, on both cases, I'm going to give that an MB2. All right, that looks pretty good. I think on the header, I'm going to give that an MB2 also, so that gets bumped down. Maybe, actually, I'm going to want that to be 3. Just going to tweak this a little bit here. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So, that is the foundation for a pretty cool admin area for building out some blog posts. So, in the next episode, what we're going to do is actually build the public front end, because remember, this is only the back end for admin, or authors, rather. So I got a handful of other things I want to add here. I want to add some filtering so that you can filter by published or unpublished or maybe something else. I want to give you the ability to add tags, so we'll probably get to that at some point. I don't know how many episodes I'm going to do on this. I find this to be kind of a basic topic that's kind of, people think it's simple, but like there's actually a lot of cool stuff you can do in here. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, so the next episode, we're going to focus on building out the public front end. So if you enjoyed this very long episode, be sure to subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and leave a comment. But I will talk to you in the next episode.